Citadel is pleased to announce our collaboration with Orca Security, a pioneer in agentless cloud security delivering comprehensive coverage and visibility of risks across the cloud. In this video, Citadel CEO Jonathan Sharrock talks to system engineer Scott Van Kalken about how Orca has revolutionized cloud security.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we see from a Citadel perspective is clients actually don't know what they own. And actually, at the end of the day, what they want to do is they want the report, but they don't want to interfere with any sort of business operations. And that's one of the things we saw that the Orca solution was covering off.
That's right, Jono. Orca as a platform, we're completely agentless. So the way that we work is we actually we deploy a bunch of roles into the cloud accounts of the customer. That's a one-time operation, and then from there, everything around the Orca solution is completely agentless and completely hands-off.
Yeah, I noticed that with the snapshotting.
Correct, and that's got a number of benefits, right? Because we're operating on the snapshot, we're not actually operating on the running workload. There's no performance impact. That's the first thing. The second thing is that from an operational perspective, and many of our customers have fairly rigorous change control processes. It means that we're not actually changing the running workload in any way, shape or form. There's nothing to install, there's nothing to do. We're not touching it. We're operating off the snapshot only.
So there's obviously some compliance options that got my interest.
That's right. From a compliance perspective, we have 62 different compliance frameworks that are available, and this covers such things as, CIS for the cloud providers, and that's multiple versions across multiple clouds, PCI, all of the NISTs, ISOs. As you mentioned, we've got the Australian government ISM. That's really, really important. We do have CIS for the workloads as well. The CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance. We do have the NZ ISM. That's both that and the Australian ISM are very, very popular, particularly in that critical infrastructure space. And as you say, they are continuous. So once you turn on a compliance framework, there's nothing more to do because we already have the data. So even if you're turning a new compliance framework on, it only takes us, 30 or 40 seconds to give you that view because we already have all of the data to be able to make that determination. So we do have the ability to customize our compliance frameworks. So we can customize from scratch, you can build your own, or you can take an existing compliance framework and customize that and just take some of the controls from it. And where we see that being used really, really commonly is, let's say an organization is going for ISO accreditation as an example. If you turn on everything, it's a lot of stuff to fix. So what organizations do is they say, the first 3 months, I'm just going to turn on a subset. The next 3 months, I'm going to turn on a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's a really nice and easy way of being able to gradually achieve a compliance level.
Do you have some examples of some recent breaches where having an audit would have saved the day?
With Orca, we're not looking in the rearview mirror at what has happened. We're proactively looking forward at risks in your environment. So Orca is quite different in that respect, that we look forward, we're detecting and prioritizing risks in your environment that have not happened, right? So that's number one. In terms of customers that I've worked with directly, there's been a number of them in Australia and throughout the region where we have detected things where we've sat there and we've run Orca across their accounts. They've detected some things either in their APIs or in PII data that's been left laying around, and they've absolutely freaked out. And then they've gone on to remediate that. Whether that would have caused a wider breach, we will never know because they actually got on and fixed it before a breach occurred, right?
And have you got something you can maybe just share with us report-wise, or have you got anything you can show us that gives a kind of indication of what the outcome is for the client and someone that's actually using the service?
So one of the more unique features that we actually have is what we call a attack path. The attack path is something that is very unique, and it's unique because what we do is we take elements of the configuration of the cloud provider and elements of the workload, and we put those together in a way that surfaces a risk that's meaningful. And I'll just walk through this one here. We've read the configuration of the cloud provider, so we know that this particular asset is internet facing. This particular asset looks like a CI/CD server in production just by the name. Because we've been able to scan that, we know that that has malware on it, and we know that this has been breached. We also know that there's an insecure private key on this system that allows lateral movement to another system. The interesting thing is, again, we take into account the configuration. We know that there's an access path there as well that allows that movement. So it's not just the fact that there's an insecure private key. We couple that with the configuration. And then we look across to the right-hand side. We can see that this particular asset here, that has a role assigned to it that is administrative in nature. In and of itself, this particular asset, this development server, that does not have access to the internet. It's not really exposed in any other way. However, it is exposed because there is an access path from something else in the environment that's already been breached. This is exactly how an attacker thinks. They gain a foothold and then they look to where else they can get to. And most other tools that don't collect the data and connect the data, disparate pieces of data in this fashion, they will not surface this.
At that point, would you report it? How would you report it back? Would you send it up to a managed service provider, or would you send out a notification? What's the reporting part of it?
We do a few things. So we will raise an alert in our own system, of course. We can, of course, send that information in real time, the fact that we have made that detection, to any other system. So we quite often have managed service providers. We can integrate directly with a number of SIEM products. We can integrate directly with a number of ticketing systems, including ServiceNow, Jira, and so on. And that means that in real time, you're getting an alert of the exposure that we've detected. And you can stop that from happening. That has not happened yet. That's really important. That has not, the breach has happened, but the lateral movement component has not occurred. You can stop that from occurring.
Do you cover off platform-specific vulnerabilities on Azure, AWS, etc.?
We not only cover them off, we have a full threat research team that discovers them and responsibly discloses them. I've just done a search on Orca Security Azure as an example, and you can see 2 days ago, researchers from Orca detected Cosmos, which is Cosmos DB. Researchers from Orca are detecting all sorts of vulnerabilities in the cloud providers. There's a service fabric one. We are detecting them. We're working with the cloud providers to responsibly disclose these, right?
Giving back time to the analysts and the security teams is key. Best way to protect something, I'm going to put this in, always say this, best way to protect something is to turn it off or unplug it. You will audit stuff that's not switched on. So you might be paying for something that's parked up doing absolutely nothing.
Absolutely. One of the things that we do have is because we have a view of all of the assets, and when they were created, we can tell you how old they are, whether they're running, whether they're not running. So we do have some cost optimization queries that you can run against the Orca platform that will identify old and stale assets. One of the things that we can do just on that point around stopped assets, this is our query tool. I can search for all of my compute services, whether they're virtual machines, containers, serverless functions. Makes no difference to me. There they all are. In every single cloud provider, I've got AWS, I've got Google, I've got some Azure down here. I've got both running and stopped assets. It doesn't matter to us whether they are running, whether they are stopped, what cloud provider they're in. We treat them in exactly the same way, and we scan them in exactly the same way, whether they're running or stopped. And this gives us an unparalleled ability to be able to give you visibility into your public cloud environment.
If you've got these scripts or you help with some of the remediation, how do I as a customer keep up with all the changes and all the new stuff that's coming through?
We actually have a couple of different methods there. So we have from the news. This is curated by our threat team, our threat intelligence team. Just the other day, there was a vulnerability in OpenSSL that was disclosed, and then 2 or 3 days later, that was released. There was no CVE when it was disclosed. We were able to detect that using the information that we had, and we can show you in your environment exactly how you are affected even before the CVE was released. And we can do that based on having the information and knowing exactly what's installed on each of these images or EC2 instances. So we're continually updating not only our detections, but our remediation capability as well.
Great stuff. Anything? Do you want to give us a quick, just a few words on roadmap? Where you're going? What's coming up? What's the new release? What's it going to look like?
Yeah, so we are focused on building out our data model, right, so that we have more data, because that allows us to build those relationships across different disparate areas of your environment. We've recently released API security. We released that a little bit early into the market, purely based on some data breaches that occurred in Australia. And we acquired a company about 8 or 9 months ago that was focused purely on API security. And we've integrated that into the platform. So rather than bolting it on the side, we've actually integrated it into the platform so that we get meaningful results. We did release it early based on some stuff happening in Australia. That's one area that we are now focused on, is giving people more visibility across their APIs. And that includes the ability to detect whether an API is authenticated, whether it has PII data, and so on. Right? These are the common things that people ask about.
Yeah, I mean, without giving too much away, I won't say who it is as well, but we all know that breach is pretty well known in the news. It's probably going to become a new record for certain parts of the world. But one thing I can say we do a lot of API testing. It is very specialised. If you're in banking or whatever you're involved in, you've got certain test cases that you need to come up with to make it a successful pen test. We pen test APIs. We know it's difficult. It took us a while to even get the right people in place to be able to do it really well. So I do see from a resource and a regular thing, because you've got, I was on a call the first thing this morning, there was a version 2 of the API interface that someone was using. It turns out that everyone sort of should be using version 3, and the other one has a whole bunch of vulnerabilities. Well, at what point, unless the developer tells you that, or once again, we've got a staff attrition thing maybe we're dealing with, how do you know that you're exposed? Because unless you've got someone keeping an eye on it for you or something, so I totally get the API side of things, and it is a more expensive part of testing. API testing is a challenge, and getting it right is very specialized.
So one of the really unique things that we do there, which I quite like as an ex-developer, is the fact that we can connect. A lot of API testing today is from the outside in. Because we already have a view of the assets from the inside, because we've scanned the entire account, we can actually connect the two together. So we can say this particular API/customers refers, when you follow the chain through, goes to these particular assets. These are the things that you need to fix and remediate. And if you're only testing from the outside, that becomes really hard, because it's a black box. You've got no idea. So we do both.
So good. And then anything else on the roadmap that you want to share?
We are likely to expand our footprint in public clouds. We've recently brought on Ali Cloud for both control plane and data plane. That's really exciting for us, because, believe it or not, there are a number of customers, even in Australia, that do use Ali Cloud for various reasons. We are accelerating on being able to offer parity across all of our cloud providers. We are accelerating in every direction around new and emerging threats, right? So particularly on that API front, we are looking at offering integrations with third-party gateways, cloud-managed gateways, and so on.
With a lot of the breaches that have been popping up all over the place, the Australian government's starting to say, well, the $2 to $3 million fines aren't good enough. We're going to be up to 50 million and beyond. How does that affect people, because that's going to make it a big part of the risk. Like you risk managing it yourself, maybe when it's a few $1,000,000 and a certain size company. When these fines go up, and they are, this is something that will give you it'll give you that peace of mind where it'll actually tell you, these are the things they're going to be on the lookout for. This is what the bad guys are going to get you for. This is why you're going to end up on the front page of the newspaper, and this is why it's career destroying stuff. And this is how you get past that.
Yeah, so there's a few things there, right? If I unpack that, right? The first thing is Orca as a company, we've got our threat research team. We're constantly evolving. We're hundreds of people. As a 2 or 3 person security team inside a customer, even if you're a 50-person security team, you can't be an expert in everything. Let us do a lot of the heavy lifting for you in terms of detection, in terms of being able to keep up with emerging threats, right? That's the first thing. The second thing there is really that from a customer perspective, the fines coming into place, that's only going to bring security top of mind. And the TCO model here is really easy. If you get breached, forget about operational brand damage, right, which is very hard to quantify. The fines being larger, that's quantifiable. You will have to shell out real dollars on top of any brand damage, right? So be pragmatic about the way that you secure things. Orca takes a very pragmatic approach, and we like to sort of say, get pragmatic, get Orca, right? And the last thing I'll say there is, it's another example. A recent customer that I was dealing with, they said to us, hey, there's a board meeting today, a 3-hour board meeting. They have scheduled 45 minutes of a board meeting. So this is not an exec meeting, this is the board meeting to talk about cybersecurity.
So, and then one last thing, something around cyber insurance. When you put in your claim, they're going to ask you things like, what have you been doing to make sure that everything was okay?
Definitely, right? So from a cybersecurity insurance perspective, that makes a perfect sense. We do work in another region, in Japan, with an insurance company, and they use us as part of their forensic analysis post-breach to be able to determine how much they're going to pay out. So make no mistake, Mr. Customer, the insurance companies are wise, and we are working closely with insurance companies. So if you actually use us, you have a very, very strong mitigation in place.